All right, welcome everyone. Just making sure I'm not on mute. Welcome everyone to yet another Real Talk Family Life Building Shatterproof Families One Brick at a Time segment. We are happy to have you tonight and we look forward to an engaging program with you, which is hosted by Faith Tabernacle. We also want to say, also want to acknowledge Pastor Henry, who is in the room, and any elders from the various churches. I think people are still joining, so I want to give them a couple seconds, but we do welcome you and we will be starting shortly. Okay, it seems like everyone got comfortably in, so we can start. So I'm gonna start off with a quick run of show for what this session is about. And then after doing that, I'm gonna have the lovely panelists that we have tonight introduce themselves. They'll tell you a bit about themselves, their age, their background, where they live. But without further ado, I'm gonna start off with just giving you a background. So in regards to this session is gonna be used to have the panelists give you a breakdown of their experiences throughout their life, being church kids, quote unquote, and what it was to grow up in a church. And they're also going to give some suggestions and solutions for ways that churches can relate to youths, how they can better engage them, and how they can equip them with the skills they need to grow in their Christian faith. And so without further ado, I will start off by introducing myself, and then I'm going to go through the panelists as well. So hi, my name is Renee McCain. I grew up in Faith Tabernacle, and I've been living in Maryland for the past couple of years. I'm an analyst and I'm 28, and I'll be heading the panel, but mainly moderating and helping lead the conversation, but my lovely panelists will also be leading the conversations as well. Chelsea, would you like to start introducing yourself?
Sure. Good night, everyone. My name is Chelsea West. I am a 21-year-old final year student studying electrical and computer engineering at the St. Augustine campus. And yeah, in Trinidad and Tobago.
Kayla, would you like to go next?
Hi, good night. My name is Kayla Rennick and I'm from Barbados. I'm 17 years old and I go to Harrison College.
Dominic, would you like to go next?
Good night, everyone. My name is Dominic Canterbury. I just heard I am a student athlete attending Harrison College here in Barbados.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Jerome Ruck. I'm 18 years of age. I'm a Bajan. I'm also a young entrepreneur.
Thank you, Jerome. So this is our panel tonight, and a bit of housekeeping. We are going to have various sections of the discussion. So we have 4 sections. The first section is what it is to be growing up in church from that 3 to 11 age group. The next one is the 12 to 19 age group. And then the section after that would be about how we can better reach that 12 to 19 age group. And finally, the last segment would be about what are the dangers of not allowing this specific age group to grow in their faith and be open, and just pretty much inheriting the faith of church members and their family and so forth. So that's like pretty much what our discussion will be about tonight. Because they kind of flow into each other, we're going to take questions at the end. So we're going to leave the question and answer segment for the end of this discussion. If you do have comments, feel free to put them in the chat, but we'll be looking at that later on versus throughout the session. So without further ado, I'm going to start off. As I mentioned before, the first section that we're going to talk about is what it was like being ages 3 to 11 and growing up in church, how it was individually, what what typically programs or events will cater to that age group. So I think we can start off with Dominic. How about you give your experience first?
Okay, well, for me, my experience in that age group, 3 to 11, growing up in church, it was, I would say, although it was a big memory, also it was fun, it was interactive, and it was very informative. I'm currently at Hope Church, before it was Thankful Family Church, but the experience, it was, the way they had it set up is that from the beginning of the service, the children in that age group, they would be in their own separate, basically their own separate small church than separated from the adults in the big church. So they would go in, they would have their own worship session, they would have their own teaching session, and then a little, say, art project after. And 3 to 11, that's a huge age group. So they grow and they learn at different levels. So we had that age group split up into 3 more age groups then. So you would have, say, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, 6 to 7, and then 8 to 11. Correct. And most of the songs and stuff that they had in the worship segment, they were songs that had movements attached to them. So, and this also helped the children remember, because one of the ways to learn is by seeing visually. So one of the main songs to remember is "My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty." And one of those songs, all of those songs are, it wasn't the sort of songs that you have in the sermon in the big church, as we will say where the adults are. And another thing about the way that our church had it set up, when you enter the children's ministry, you knew it was the children's ministry. On the walls, there were paintings, there were art, there were so many captivating stuff for children to, because we know that children can get distracted. And we know that children don't like boring stuff. Children like to be and feel in the environment they're in. So for me, the environment that I had at the church, it caters to the young age that we were at. And the sermon, after the worship segment, I said, then we'll have the teaching segment. So the whole age group, 3 to 11, they will all be taught the same message, but they will be taught different aspects of the message. Because they say the 3 to 5, they won't understand and comprehend things that the 8 to 11 would. So they will get a smaller part of it, and then the 8 to 11 will get a more in-depth part. But at the end, they will all have a little art segment where they would create something based on that message. And creating that, it was something physical that they could take home and they can remember it throughout the week. They could show it to their parents and their parents could be proud of them. And that's just basically what my experience was. It was fun, interactive, it was catered to us well, and we learned a lot.
Thank you, Dominic. And I know, Kayla, you also had a similar experience. Is there anything you want to add in regards to your experience during that time?
Not really. I also went to Hope Church and Thankful Family Church. I think Dominic pretty much explained all of it. But like he said, it just really catered to those specific age groups. So, and as opposed to having, 3, 4-year-olds who don't really, they won't last 2 hours, 3 hours, or 3 hours in church, having a way for them to, be interested in going to church, wanting to learn the Bible, but in a way that will cater to them. And then because of their age group, there was also snack time. So like after you've had worship and you've learned your verse and done your project, you'd give snacks. Obviously, as an adult, you don't expect to come to church and, be there eating and drinking well, but because of the age group and you want them to come back, you do what's necessary to cater to them.
Yes. Thank you. And I there was some key points I just wanted to highlight from what Dominic and Kayla mentioned. They mentioned that the teaching was age specific. There was a lot of imagery on the walls to really engage that age group. And also, I'm not sure if they mentioned it, but their Sunday school happened the same time as the general service. So they spend that entire time being separate and being taught their own age-specific sermons as well. And that allowed them to be engaged and really learn even the elementary components of the Bible. Jerome, would you also like to share your experience of growing up in church that time?
Growing up in church, Well, the memory is not as great as I thought it used to be. But what I know for sure was that, it was basic activities and stories about the Bible and stuff, where we just gave us an introduction on pretty much stories and Bibles. Pretty much, yeah, stories in the Bible where, for example, Noah and the ark, Jonah and the whale, pretty much basic small activities that we can remember too. Usually one thing I can actually remember though was snack time, always afterwards you look forward to a snack, So that was basically my memory of the 3 to 11 age group. Everything Dominic and Kayla was saying, when I went to the same place as them, it was pretty much similar to how I was raised and stuff at that age.
Thank you, Jerome. Chelsea, I know in like our past discussions, you mentioned that your experience was a little bit different. Can you shed some light on that?
All right. So I went to an Anglican church between the ages of 3 to 11. And we did have the Sunday school, but the difference compared to the experiences that Kayla, Dominic, and Rome would have was if church was, let's say, 3 hours, as in a church for the adults, we would say the younger kids would have Sunday school for about an hour outside of course, the big church. And then after Sunday school, we would go into the big church. So during Sunday school, we would have our own Sunday school sessions where everybody would sing and listen to read Bible verses. And then maybe for the rest of the session, we would have break out into our individual groups. But unfortunately, we still ended up going back into the big church for majority of the church session to be with the adults. We did have the same snack session, but I think given I went to Anglican church and of course hearing everybody's experience, it was completely different because we didn't have anything on the walls that captivated us, that made you know that, okay, this was Sunday school, this is where the kids were. And honestly, the only thing I could remember other than the snacks was my Sunday school teacher and my friends. I don't remember much of anything significant other than maybe a few Bible verses, but we didn't get the little toys or the little anything to carry home to show mommy, okay, this is what we did at Sunday school. It was like, you just needed time for the kids to be away and then going to the big church. So I don't find it was captivating based on these stories that I've heard from other churches. So yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chelsea. And I think my experience was a little more similar to Chelsea's experience. When I was growing up, Sunday school was before church. So I think it was that hour before church, we would have Sunday school. And I did enjoy it. For the most part, we had games or we learned songs. Sometimes we would do things and present it to the general church. And that was fun, just having that separate time. But that also meant that I would have to sit down in the general church for those hours. And as a child, I must admit, I was distracted most of the times. I didn't really connect with the sermon. Most times at that age, at 3 to 11, I would fall asleep. And as I got a little bit older, I would just people watch to make sure that I would stay awake. Because after certain age, my dad was like, you need to be awake in church. And I'm just like, I don't know what they're saying. But I tried my very best. And so I would just like look around the room and stuff. But what Kayla and Dominic, what really struck me about what Kayla and Dominic was talking about was the component of it being very age specific. So even though 3 to 11 was Sunday school, they also broke down the various teachings into smaller categories. So 3 to 5 to 6 to 8 or whatever the case was. The reason why that really struck out to me is because I remember specifically, this is the only lesson in Sunday school that I remember. And I know they were talking about hell. And I remember as a child, I was frightened. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to make God mad. I'm just going to obey because this is a big, scary God. And he sends people to this place called hell. And what I heard about hell in that Sunday school service, I don't want to go there. And I don't want my family to go there. And I just want to be good. And so it took a long time from just hearing that one. That's the only lesson in Sunday school I do remember hearing about hell in that way. It really made my perception of God being just that overarching authority that we just need to appease to. And so I think it's very important when we're having these Sunday school lessons that it's really intentional with regards to it being age appropriate. And I know that was completely different with regards to when my brother, who was 6 years younger than me, ended up going into Sunday school, because they in fact had Sunday school during the sermon. So that was after worship, they would go and they would have their own session as well. And I would sometimes go out for water and just like peek in to see what they were doing. And I could really see the difference in terms of their experiences and how it was designed to really inform them of the love of God. And I think that's very important and very crucial in that elementary phase for children to understand the love of God. And so I would say that was a drastic improvement. And as we close this segment, I just wanted to highlight that we believe that overall we had really great experiences in Sunday school. And we just want to reiterate that honestly, it's really hard for this age group to pay attention in the general assembly. So it is ideal for them to have their own separate church where they could learn age appropriate lessons and they can really connect. And the kids are very easily distracted. So having a way for them to stay engaged, whether it's having a snack time, whether it's drawing, whether it's acting out a little play. So they have their various activities. We think that this is crucial to ensure that they get those little elementary lessons learned about what it is to be a Christian. And moving on, we want to go into the 12 to 19 group. And just starting to talk about what our experience was growing up in church at that time, and what we remembered, and how we felt we connected in the general church at that time, how we thought that we related to the sermons and all of these things. So I think we can start up. Chelsea, would you like to start up with your experience?
Sure. So, well, during this time, I would have been between leaving primary school and maybe secondary school. And between that age, I actually was introduced to the church that Kayla and Dominic go to. But my cousins, and my mom actually was feeling a little uncomfortable, not really uncomfortable, but she wasn't feeling it. She was feeling the message from our church. So we went to their church, and like they said, it was completely different. And at that age, it kind of introduced me to the difference in the denominations, like Dominic correctly told me. At my church, it was more, and at their church, it was a bit more upbeat. It was more upbeat and lively, and you could actually feel the message, as a preteen. So I think, changing and experiencing different things made me start to question a lot of, I think, religion on a whole. And then once I finished my preteen or teen years and I left home to go to school, I think because I had so many people's opinion of what God is and Christ is and Jesus and, just everything with respect to religion being thrown at me, whether it be from school or friends or different religious backgrounds. When I went to school and my family members would say, oh, well, I know this person in Trinidad that has this church and this thing, and everybody had somewhere for me to go, I just shut down and I said, no, I go in school to study. I do have family that they have like online church and stuff that I could watch into, but everybody once again was throwing everything at me, and because I didn't have the foundation to generally understand the basics, in my opinion, exactly how things should be, like speaking in tongues. You might go to this church and they say speak in tongues and interpret. But at another church, they would tell you, okay, you're supposed to speak in tongues and somebody else is supposed to interpret your message. You are not supposed to interpret your message. So I think during those years of preteen and teen, I had it was confusion, and it made me feel like, okay, no, I want to hold back. I believe in God. I believe I pray every day, but I just feel as though, everybody has an opinion and I need to find my own opinion. And I don't think that's fair to the preteens because you need guidance, So that was my experience during, what was the age range? Like 11 to 19?
12 to 9.
12, sorry. So now I'm a bit out of that bracket now. But yeah, during those years were extremely confusing.
So what I'm hearing you say, Chelsea, is that you felt during that time, the faiths of everyone around you was impressed upon you. And you were kind of told to kind of listen blindly to whatever they said, but you weren't given the opportunity to have those questions answered, or have a place where you can actually engage and kind of like come into your own in terms of your relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know Dominic and Kayla, they had a bit of a different experience with regards to their church. Dominic, would you like to start with your experience?
Okay, so again, first start on my experience as I went into the General Assembly, which at that time we would have called the big church. At that age range, between I would say 12 going to 15. When we went into big church, we were still cultured and we were still programmed into seeing all the colors, having the message given us to a certain way. So when we went into the bigger church, the General Assembly, it was a whole new experience that we were just put into. Because when you look at the worship and you compare the worship, when we had worship in Sunday school, the teacher would give a song, she would show the dances or whatever it might be. We would do it, we would all be having fun, we know what it is we were saying. And then when we get into the sermon or the big church, the lights off, everything is dark, songs are playing, some people standing, doing whatever they're doing, some people just standing up straight, some people are hollering loud. And it's kind of a little scary at that moment, just seeing people all over the place. So for me at that age, it was, I'd say, a little shocking. And sometimes I didn't really know what to do. So just standing there looking at people, I'm thinking to myself, what are these people really doing? So then after the worship aspect, now we're going to the sermon. For the sermon, I was totally lost. I could not relate to anything that was going on at that time. So during the sermon, what I would do, because at that time we didn't have a phone as yet, I would either get my mother's phone and play like snakes and ladders or bricks or something, or then when I got to say 15, when I moved away from sitting at my mother, when I was sitting with the other youngsters in the church, we would either have a paper and we were playing games on a paper. So essentially we weren't paying attention to the sermon because it wasn't something that we could have said that we were easy to. It wasn't something that we understood. Because there's certain jargons, there were certain things that were said about in the Bible that we weren't really that au fait with the Bible as yet. So we didn't really understand what the pastor or the preacher or whoever was speaking was relating to. So there really wasn't much for us to do in that service. We were just looking at the clock, waiting for the time to come when church is finished and we get to go and hang out after church and then go home. But then as I hit 16 to 18, which is where I'm at currently, this is me when I wanted to get more into what was going on. And because at this stage of my life, the amount of things are happening, I was starting to understand what's happening in the sermon. I could comprehend certain stuff and I could take in for myself now. And then if I don't understand it, there are people that I could have gone and talked to try and break it down for me. So, and as Chelsea said, there were certain things that was forced on her and about the speaking in tongues and all that. For me, there was an outside of it where some things were forced, but some things weren't. So the simple things like standing when we are worshiping or stuff like that, yes, we will be told that, and then we would, during the sermon, if we were talking, we'd be told to try and pay attention, and that's no problem. But for the speaking in tongues and stuff, we were told, well, for me, is to not do that if there's no actual relationship with God behind it. As in, if you don't do it just because it looks fancy, don't do it just because you see other people doing it. You need to know for yourself what it is you're doing these certain things. So for me, that's basically my experience of going into the General Assembly between the ages of 12 to 18, 19, where I'm at now.
So what I'm hearing you say, Dominic, is that even in that 12 to 19 group, if you had like a stark difference in terms of your experience with regards to 12 to 15, you're still making that transition from being in the Sunday school and still getting to like understanding what it is to be in the big church. But in that 16 to 18, like 19 range, you started to, come into your own and started to connect with the sermons. And at that time you were open to hearing from others and really learning. So that's important to know. Kayla, I wanted to ask you, I know you guys have a specific youth group. Can you shed some light on your experiences there?
Sorry, repeat that last part. My experiences on what? The same
On-
19?
Yes, all your experiences growing up in that time, but also your youth group that you
okay.
attended.
So yeah, like Dominic said, you know, I think the jump from Sunday school, children's ministry to the big church, it was a big jump. So there's really no bridge to kind of make the transition a bit easier. You know, 1 minute you're a child singing songs and dance moves and doing arts and craft to watching people speak in tongues and being called on by God to do all of these different types of things, people crying, and it's like the jump was just so much. So I think then with our church, our youth group, EPIC, it's called EPIC, Equipping Young People in Christ. It was on a Friday evening. So that was kind of, I think, the bridge for us. Although it wasn't like it wasn't Sunday, it was that where you can really, as a preteen to teenager, kind of learn the word of God, cater to your age group. So like Sunday school, it was broken down again, but only obviously not as much because there's not as much like maturity change, I guess, between the age groups. It was like 12 to 15 and 16 to 19. So it was just kind of the same worship, songs, Bible verse reading, and then you get to discuss, you know, trying to figure out really what's Christianity, who's God, all of those stuff, but at our age group. Yeah.
Thank you. So I know, Jerome, you initially started off going to another church, and then when your youth group phased out, you decided to join Kayla's and Dominic's youth group. So I just want to get a little bit of background on what your experience was genuinely in church, but also what what were the benefits of you transitioning into another youth group?
Okay, so my experience, the 12-11 age group, this is where I got baptized, and this was where all the questions started to ask. You know, you start to ask a lot of questions about what is the reason I actually, you know, believe in this God that everyone is talking about. So this was, I think, as the older I got, I think they said, you know what, I believe it's time I got more in depth in this whole God thing. But as I got older, I started to understand the word and understand, you know, what is really being preached and really understanding what the individuals who in our church, you know, who usually preach. Because the way how they preach is that the Sunday school teachers are also preaching. The Sunday school teachers who taught Sunday school was also the ones preaching in the big church. So anytime, let me say for example, the rain fell or you don't have a teacher to teach Sunday school, you will have the young ones come into the church. So they will set it up where the Sunday school teachers teach their message to the bigger folks, but also to us too as well, how we can understand. You know, ask us questions, have us being interactive and stuff. So about the youth transition. I think before I talk about the transition, I should talk about how I actually ended up joining EPIC. Now, the church I'm currently at now, it was a youth group that eventually it died because there was no one to lead. So at the time, while I was in the previous youth group, I had actually got an invite to EPIC. So being invited to EPIC, this was where I started to, you know, get to know the individuals at EPIC, understand what EPIC's about and stuff. So usually I'm a people's person. So when my previous youth group died out, I tell myself, well, you know, I'm a people's person, so let me join EPIC, since that was a different scenery, much more young people, different experience. So in joining EPIC, this was where, you know, I really started to build my character, got more in depth in the Bible. I was actually exposed to new opportunities where I can actually, be much bolder in my faith. So the transition was a blessing because I actually started to walk in what I believe is my purpose. So that is my experience in 12 to 11 and also the transition to youth.
Thank you, Jerome. And I liked hearing the perspective of Dominic, Kayla, and Jerome in terms of the experience with Epic. And what I gathered from that was that, this allowed them this was their quote unquote bridge between Sunday school and the General Assembly. It allowed them to be with like-minded people and also be taught the word, and it being broken down into digestible parts for them. And just generally they were able to connect with their peers, which is very important at that age, to develop those social skills. And so I'll just give my experience as well. I think Dominic did a great job articulating that there is a big difference between that 12 to 15 age group versus the 16 to 19. By that time, 12 to 15, I was already baptized, and I had gone through converts class. So I would listen to the sermons, but I don't think I was at a level of maturity where I could have fully understood what was going on. And so, although I didn't fall asleep anymore, I would still people watch and get distracted. But as I grew up a little bit more, and at 16, that's 16 to 19 age group, I did start listening to the sermons and I did start keeping things in mind. But what I would note is that growing up in church, you kind of hear a lot. You hear a lot of words, you hear speaking in tongues, you pray without ceasing, and all of these jargons and Christianese that people talk about. And you take those things on, but you don't know what those mean. You say it because everyone's saying it, but you don't know what the heart behind that is, what's the intention of that, and what that's supposed to really do for your life. You hear you must forgive, but you don't know a process for forgiving someone. You just grow up and you're everyone's saying it and I'm supposed to do it, so I'm going to just start doing it because that's what they're saying. And I think that was generally by 12 to 19, I just started to learn more about Christian culture, but not really understand what that meant specifically in terms of my faith. So I would I could speak the language, I can give the appearance of what it is to be a Christian. And I learned that really well. But I don't think at that time I knew what it meant, what fasting did. Why did we fast? You don't just fast for your own reasons. You're supposed to only fast for groups. For your own individual things, no, that's not what fasting is for. And that's something in the Bible I didn't know. People were you need something, fast about it. What? We need that actual context as well. But I would say I really enjoyed my time going to youth group at Faith Tabernacle. I was blessed to grow up in a generation where there was a lot of youth around my age. And I liked interacting with them. It was a good place to safely interact outside of school and all of these things, and really learn how it is to interact with people. I like that, we had our own little worship during that time. We would sometimes have sermons, very rarely, but we would do activities. We'd have Bible quizzes and games. We'll also watch movies. And most times we would be preparing for either Easter Sunday or Christmas. So we always had an agenda. So we didn't just appear at church and be okay, let's figure something out. There was always something planned, which I really enjoyed. But I do think beyond engaging the youths, there also needs to be an element of informing the youths. And I see a lot with just the general church culture right now of how they try to attract youths. They try to attract them with smoke machines and all of these neon lights, which is glamorous and catchy, but even though that attracts people in, that's not what's going to keep them. And we need to ensure that we are really feeding them with the word of God and what it is to be a Christian and what the gospel means when they say we're saved by the grace and our faith in that grace alone. And we're not saved by our works at all. And these are elements of the gospel that really needs to be ingrained into the minds of our youth so that they can have a firm footing when they're outside interacting with the general public. And that leads us kind of into our next segment, which is what we think is like, what's a good solution for engaging the youths, but also informing them. And our solution that we came up with in our brainstorm session was something called discipleship classes. And we saw these as classes that could either happen weekly or every 2 weeks, where that age group is broken up 12 to 15, and that's 16 to 19, where someone who is well learned in the gospel, whether it's a deacon or a junior pastor or the pastor, they actually provide a safe space for youths to learn gradually the concepts and the principles of the Bible, and also have a safe space for them to ask questions and really get to the bottom of their confusion, their doubts, any misunderstandings they may have, what it is to be growing up a teenager who's also trying to find their faith and what it is to actually believe in Jesus. We saw this as an opportunity for them to really become part of the assembly and really connect with leadership, because this would actually need to be headed by leadership because of the depth and breadth of knowledge and wisdom that would be needed to run a class like this. And we think that this is very important because we need to ensure that we're equipping the next generation for, when we know we're talking about 3 to 11 and 12 to 19, but this is going to be most impactful for that 20 and over age group when they're actually leaving the nest and going and being open to all of these different influences out there. And so I just want to open it up to my panel to kind of talk about what they think are key aspects of this discipleship class, and what are the ways that even those who are not heading it, or the General Assembly, can ensure that they're engaging youths and treating them with respect and allowing them the safe space to ask questions. Go ahead, Dominic.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here. As we were talking about the discipleship session in our previous discussion, when the questions came up about who should be teaching it, and she said it should be one of the head leaders in church. But then one of the other aspects that we looked at will be someone of our age or someone a little younger that we could relate to. But although, yes, it's good for us to have someone a little younger, I believe it's also great for us to have someone who's older and has gone through a lot more, and so that they can relate to our situation. And even as in they went through it already, so they know what it is and they can see the other side. Because most of the time, you use the aspect of sports, you as the athlete, you don't really see exactly what it is that's happening. You going through something, you might feel a certain way and you think you're doing it a certain way, but eyes on the outside can look back and tell you you are doing this and this and this or this, correct? And that's why I believe with the discipleship class, well, that is good. That they should have also allocated people to keep with you and check upon you during the week or whatever it might be. Because the same way in Sunday school, how we were sent home with something practical, something physical that we could look at and remind us of what is going on. If we have that person there during the week that will check upon us, so that we can talk to when certain things are going on, not just we say we come on Fridays and we talk about whatever it may be. In most aspects of life, having a coach, someone there to help you through it, is better than not. And yes, there's the Bible there that you could go and read, but sometimes at the young age when you're not reading the Bible and stuff, you don't really understand certain things. And you are told one that it would come to you, you're told that to pray about it. But what if at that time you don't know how to pray as yet? And then the response to that is just say whatever comes to your mind. But I believe if you have this discipleship class, which you are looking to implement, which could be also the youth groups, this would really help mold the teenagers and leaving into teenagers, as Renee said, because when you get into that age, going upwards of 20, at that time you left the nest, you might not be going to church as much, because now you could decide if you want to go to church or not. You're not in your parents' household where they are telling you, yes, come to church, or whatever the case may be. So if you are raised up right in that way, and you have all this information beforehand, then that would be better for us trying to live this Christian life.
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump in here after Dominic. I think like another key thing I would say for these discipleship classes is, just having a safe space and safe people to talk to, because I find, like, this is my personal opinion, you tend to see a lot of people in church, try to put on a front that, oh yes, I'm in a happy marriage and I have this great relationship with God and stuff like that. And it's not necessarily, we want to see all the flaws, or like you see pastors with like tattoos and stuff like that. And it's like, we see you've had your downfalls and we want to know not necessarily how you come back from that. Everybody sins, and it's like, you can't, yes, you can teach young people to, this is what you have to do. This is the way to think, to live in Christ. But at the same time, it's like, we want to hear experiences. We want to, feel that, it's not just necessarily if I sin, oh, I need to hide it because we see everybody else putting on this front of being perfect and stuff like that. So I just think that like having people just to be real, like I was once your age and I did X, Y, and Z. So it's okay if, you have a hiccup or two along the way, but you can come back from that.
Yes, I completely agree, Kayla. I think, and this kind of goes beyond just those classes, but just how the General Assembly and general members kind of interact with youths. I think it's important that, there's a level of vulnerability and honesty and transparency, that youths are not just kind of like told to be quiet and we told you what to do, you better do it. And then people pretend like they didn't make those same mistakes. Because this generation, like not even so much millennials, but the Gen Z, they have a good way of sussing out people and figuring out who is real and who isn't. So even when you pretend, they can read straight through you. And so it's a good way to engage when you can kind of open up and allow them to see your humanity, and that makes them more comfortable to share their concerns and their humanity as well. And a lot of mishaps may be avoided if they know that they can come to someone within the church and really have a listening ear and not a judgy ear, not a person who's just going to be like, this is what the Bible say, sit down and be quiet, but someone who's really going to connect and empathize with them. And I think that doesn't even need to only happen in these classes. In fact, it should happen in the church as a whole, where, we take special care and we're really intentional about how we interact with those youths, and so that they know church is a safe place, not a place where they're judged or told to be quiet and listen to the sermon, and just figure out like whatever we said, that's it. Don't ask to turn left or right. That's what we're saying. And I think that's really crucial. But I'll open it back up to the panelists to add anything more.
I'm just gonna jump in quickly before Jerome Marshall, see if there's anything. This just touch on what Renee just said. That culture of telling the younger people to just sit and listen is really detrimental when they get older and they're going into the youth groups now, as if the church was to implement a youth group. Because when it comes to our youth group, when it initially started, many new people coming, say we asked the question and we were looking for response, because most of youth groups, we want it to be something interactive so that the children could learn and they could grow in their faith. But when they're coming from having been told to just listen, to don't do this and just go with it, what happens is when the question is asked, they don't want to talk. They don't want to have that out there for someone to go and critique on them and say this or say that. So what she is saying, it shows, and there's experience, and we could talk back on our past experience from being in epic groups, because Kayla and Joe, man, we are in the same epic group. we would be have to want to start put conversation because the general question is asked. And we're trying to get everyone interactive. We're trying to help them out and live their lives, but we can't help out if you don't know what's going on. We can't help you grow if you do not know where you're at. So the talking and telling the children to just be quiet and stuff, I believe that should be phased out, and instead trying to get them more interactive, like what's happening now, and trying to give them a voice as we are here talking and discussing so that anyone else could hear. And then from them hearing us, they will come and ask us questions and allow us to ask the questions and give us feedback and get the conversation going.
Thank you, Dominic. You did bring out a good point that even in those situations where it is catered to the youths, if they have felt like they should stay quiet in the bigger group, they may not even be comfortable in the smaller groups. So that also just like a change in culture overall where people are open. Jerome, you wanna add something?
Yeah, so I strongly believe in what Dominic and Kayla was saying. Usually discipline classes in general, they usually, betters an individual in general. But discipline classes, especially when it comes to the word and especially for us young Christians, it will put us in a better position where we can understand the word and know how to navigate life, especially when we have, for example, discipline classes could be any class, for example, youth. So when we have individuals who can, help us through life, we can ask questions and they can give us a response. It puts us in a better position that, we could be able to help a friend. Because there's a verse that says, train up a child in the way it should go, and when it get older, it should not depart from it. And I believe that's one of the verses that stuck with me, and I believe that statement strongly shaped me into the individual I am today. Because some of the things that I was taught when I was younger, I still use up to this day. And teachings, even the meaning of faith, up to this day, I still remember in Sunday school. And it was broken down in a way that I could understand it. And when someone asks about faith, I can then translate. So discipline classes not only help us in general, but it gives us, that extra boost.
Thank you, Jerome. That's a really good point, that when you talk about training up a child, it's not just telling them what to do, but really teaching them, ensuring that they have those skills and they're ready for this real world, and so that they can't depart from what you've taught them. Chelsea, you'd like to add?
All right, yes. So I wanted to go last because I wanted to kind of sum up with an example, everything everybody said, because I completely agree. So like a few things I have written down was number one, carpooling, number two, having an open pastor or leader, and living by setting an example. So to tie it all together, I think as a child that had parents that worked shift, I wasn't able to go to the youth groups, like everybody else would have been able to, because my parents work. So I think we have to create a group, to pull each other along, whether it's, my kid can't make it this week, so, you carry them, and next week, carpool, and make sure that all the youth do get to our youth fellowship or whatever. And then, like we were saying, having an open pastor, for example, as a teenager, being confused, and my mom's side of the family was very religious, I had to go to almost everyone's church. And to this day, there's only one pastor that I could say remember everything he said. And it was because he was relatable. He literally was giving us examples of like how he would go on the block, and talk to the youth and engage them and just share his experience. Like we were saying, talk about his tattoos and stuff like that. And that engaged me because I was like, yo, what? I see my friends doing these things and he has done it. And of course, maybe he says, no, I shouldn't have done that. But no, that is what I went through. And this is where I am today. I think having someone like that is beneficial, as opposed to having someone, yes, you have a pastor that's religious, but doesn't want to open up. So I think having a young, experienced person would kind of pull us in the right direction. And lastly, the only way to really have us to live a godly life is to set an example, like we said. Of course, we see our parents, we know what happens in the household. And, then you go to church and everything is so everything is so nice and everybody's so happy. And when we go out and experience things and realize life is really not as amazing as, you know, people make it seem. No, we question, is something wrong with me? You know, what is going on? And as a young preteen or a young adult now, I see this in my friends. I see this in the kids and the children that grew up in church. You know, everything at church, you know, everybody's so nice and sit down and, you know, listen or appear to listen. But then when we leave church, it's like a completely different person. So, and these are things, of course, we learn from our parents, our aunts, our uncles, the people that we see on a daily basis. So I think, yes, we need to have these classes, but it takes more than just a pastor coming in and having a youth group and just discussing, you know, what it is to be a Christian. It takes leading by example and pulling everybody, you know, to the path of Christianity. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree with like what Chelsea said. And like before we move on, I think like just like how she talked about that vulnerability of, you know, the heads of the church that you see, that's gonna engage. Is like, you've been there. So I want to open up and talk to you about that life story so that I know I'm not the only one going through it. I think it's more so like just knowing that I'm not the first person to experience this. There are people there to help me go through it. And then like with what Jerome said, with the verse, I think like because of the day and age we live in now too, and you know, most people go to, whether you go to university or if you just go straight to work, just that transition between being a secondary school student and going into either tertiary level education or the working world, that you meet so many people from so many different cultural backgrounds and religious backgrounds. And I know when we were having the conversation, Rennie had made a point about her orientation using the Bible, and not in a way to, you know, say, ooh, let's be interested in Christianity, this is something on. It's more so in a way to not necessarily slander it, but, you know, not positively. And it's like, if, you know, when you get into that world, it's like you can't, and somebody asks, why do you believe in God? Why are you a Christian? You can't really say, my mommy and my daddy made me go to church, or I had to go to church every Sunday. And I think like just having the vulnerable leaders that will interest me and help me want to grow in my faith, which would just help me with my whole career path once I leave, or once we all leave this teenage level.
Thank you, panelists. And I love that you guys gave me a great segue into our last section, which is where we're gonna just talk about why we think it's so crucial to equip this 12 to 19 age group. And that's because we see the dangers of what we're gonna call blind faith, which is where where people who grew up in church kind of just inherit the faith of their family members, church members, and they haven't actually gotten a full understanding of what it is to be a Christian, when God says count the cost, they don't even know there's a cost. They just said, okay, I'm a Christian because I grew up in church. And so in regards to blind faith, I can start off with my experience, and I'm gonna open it up to the panel as well in terms of what are the dangers of blind faith. And so we mentioned before that there seems to be this pervasive culture in church of just keeping the youths quiet and occupied. And we think that's a big danger, because after being told for so many years to just listen to what you're told to do, and not allowing them to ask questions, not allowing them to be in a space or have an opportunity to be like, oh, I know you said this, but what does this actually mean? And how do I really live that out? That is a huge danger. That could be, you can feel safe with that when you're in your parents' home. When you go out in the real world, all those questions that won't being asked or answered, you're going to get those same questions outside from those outsiders, and you're not going to have that answer ready. And I can personally attest, you know, Kayla mentioned it, but when I started college, I had to do obviously some mandatory classes, which had nothing to do with what I was interested in. But one of them was a slightly philosophy class. And yes, as Kayla mentioned, it did incorporate like verses in the Bible. But it was not used to be like, oh, this is a concept in the Bible. What do you guys think? It was like, how can we dismantle what is being said in the Bible? And also that same class used a bunch of philosophers in it, Nietzsche, Freud, all of them. You can list them off. And it was just a way of kind of comparing and discrediting all of these philosophies. And I remember sitting in that class and being like, what they're saying about the Bible is wrong, and getting frustrated, but I didn't have an answer. I couldn't have been like, hey, professor, I think you're wrong because XYZ, because I didn't know what that XYZ was. I just felt frustrated and upset and being like, you're wrong. There's a reason. I'm sure there's a reason why you're wrong, but I'm going to have to sit quietly because I don't know it. And I think that's a huge danger. And I remember even that whole year, I felt like, not like my faith was actually being tested in a real way, but like people just coming up to me and being like, oh, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And I was like, I don't know enough about this to talk about this. And I just felt like I wasn't fully equipped for what the world was asking of me. And I think that's so dangerous because yes, it's great to just listen to the loudest voice in the room when that voice is the pastor, when that voice is your parents, when that voice is the deacons. But when you go out there and that voice is a professor, when you go out there and that voice is a friend who's an atheist, when you go out there and that voice is an employer who doesn't care about anything, that's when it becomes scary because that muscle memory of just listening and doing what you're told is going to lead you down a path where you're confused, you're misled, and also they're not only just like people who don't believe in Christ, they're people who believe in all kinds of religions, who have their reasons for why they believe, who know exactly what are the concepts and principles in their various texts and all of their various books that they follow. They know. And so if you come with any shaky faith, they feel it and they can see that and they know how to break apart certain things so that you are not going to be able to answer in a way where you can stand firm-footed. And it just reminds me of that part in 1 Peter 3:15, I believe, where Peter says, always have a reason or an answer for when someone asks you why you have this hope. And so we are mandated in the Bible to have a firm understanding of why we believe in Christ, of why we believe that we're saved by grace and grace alone. We have to have that. And so we need to ensure that we don't rob or even prevent these youths who they definitely don't know better. I would have never said at 19 or 12 or anything, hey, can you teach me how to pray? I really want to learn how to pray. I would have never said that. So waiting for them to initiate it is probably not the best way, but I think we can always go back to that later. But I really want to just open it up to the panelists to talk about what they think are other dangers of just pretty much inheriting the fate of the people around them, and what they think would hurt them in the future if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that was a great point you made there of one of the main dangers of leading blind faith. But before you give my reasoning, I wrote something here. When we say that to give the children a voice, we don't mean for them to disobey, because in the Bible it says, obey your father and mother. And I believe that all of us here, we do that. And for some people might raise the children differently, but I believe in obeying and then finding out the reasoning or whatever after. And that's what we are trying to get at, not to say disobey the parents or disobey the people that are giving you instructions. But another main danger of living blindly in your faith, for me, that it really stuck out to me, is not that you can't have the answers and you don't know the reasoning for certain things, but because you don't know the reasoning and the background and the morals and stuff behind certain rules, you can be easily swayed into something else that you might not want to be swayed into, and you might not see it that way. And the reason you might not see it that way is because you do not know that this is wrong. You do not know that this is this because of this. So in this secular life that there are many things that are happening currently. And for some of them, you might say, oh, they're just doing that. It's okay, it's fine. But when you get deeper into what's actually going on, you're realizing that it's wrong because of certain things that are happening. And for me as an athlete, I have to stretch out and stuff after a certain workout or exercise so that my body keeps fit. And then there are some people that would go and do yoga or whatever the case may be, and they might set up a room with certain lights and stuff, and they might have certain words and things on the wall. And some people that want to live the Christian life but don't know that these certain things that you should not be doing, they will go and do it just because they think, oh, I'm just stretching, I'm just getting better at what it is I'm doing. But in the reality, there's spiritual things going on, there's demons, there's a lot going on. And if you are not grounded in that faith, if you do not have the structure and the base, as Renee said, you can easily be washed away into something else. Even in our church this past Sunday, the speaker talked about, because this was our 20th anniversary as a church, Hope Church, the speaker talked about how if someone was to enter Hope Church, that they should know by the experience of interacting with the people there, by entering the building, and not only entering the building, but outside of the walls as well, they should have certain things that they know Hope Church stands for, certain things that once you interact with anyone from Hope Church, you know, this is Hope Church, this is what they believe. So if you don't have that firm foundation, the same way if you build your house on sand, it can easily be washed away. So that blind faith, if you don't have that firm foundation, you can be swayed into many other religions, that, as Renee said, the other religions that they know what it is you're saying. They can come and trip you up and you don't even realize you're being tripped up. So you have to know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dominic on that. And I think we don't really realize how easy it is to like deviate from that. Because like I remember earlier this year, well, maybe not earlier this year, probably, like I say like 2 months ago, I went to her and I was like, Mommy, I want a belly button and a nose piercing. And she was like, go in the Bible and tell me what the Bible says about it. And you know, at first I was just like, I don't want to go in no Bible and I look for no reasoning because I just think they look nice and I want a belly button piercing and a nose piercing. But then after really like go researching and see, it's like they represent sexual attractions to females and slavery. And it's like, because I'm 17, so anybody between the ages of like this teenage years is like they just want, I think a belly button person is nice, I think a nose piercing is nice, I want it in the church or not. But then if you actually really go and like look, something as simple as that, a piercing, and really see the thing, is like, is that really something I want on my body? And that's what I want to see and represent? Because although, you know, I'm not necessarily, everybody's not going to see those things and see that it represents that, but it's like, you yourself should know why you're doing certain things. And it's like, if I wasn't guided by like my mom to go in the Bible and see what it really means, or have just that foundation of, you know, being grounded in the Bible, I would be out here represented as a slave. It's like, it's just something as simple as that. And it can really go much deeper and much bigger as you get older and stuff like that.
And just to add to Kayla and what Dominic was saying, I strongly agree with what they were saying, especially the danger of blinded faith, especially in a culture where there's a lot of uncertainty, where if you look on social media, everyone has the bio as child of God and Christian. And it tends to put us in a position where we can be easily persuaded by what this Christian culture is supposed to be, not actually, you know, having the root of what we actually supposed to do, which is actually the Bible, which is our guide to follow. So which is why I strongly believe, which is the point I'm going to say, is, you know, equipping our young people, you know, with a sound understanding of the gospel. Because telling an individual to pray, telling an individual to fast, and to do certain things about the gospel and to preach it is one thing. If you actually equip us with the tools we need and to guide us on how we can do it. There's this quote that says, give a man a fish, you feed him from a day. If you teach him a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That strongly relates to us as Christians. you teach us as young believers, you know, the ways of the Bible, we can be able to say, hey, especially in an online community where there's no face-to-face church and our only connection was face-to-face. It puts us in a position where some of us started to go overseas, some of us started to travel. And when you are alone, you have different culture tends to shape our mind. So when we are equipped knowing, you know, hey, these are the principles of what we as Christians supposed to be living body life, then we can understand, hey, this is the way we should go. And that is, you know, so hopefully that was able to answer the need.
You see, Jerome, there's a reason why I think you should always go before me, because you just spoke about, you know, leaving home and experiencing different cultures. And that was my life. That is my life. You know, I left home at 18 to go to Trinidad to study. And Trinidad has a lot of religious backgrounds, whether it be Hindu, Muslim. And for me, I was very interested. I always wanted to know, you know, why do you shave your head? Or what, you know, what always happened? And my friends would explain it to me. And then when they would ask, you know, what as a Christian, what do we do? I mean, I just told them what my parents made me do. But I was always interested. And if I didn't have a, like I said, a religious background or a mother that was always on me to go to church and understand the Bible, like Kayla's mom, I wanted a nose piercing, I wanted an anklet, everything. My sister wants them right now. When I was like 15, my mom told me, go check that. I didn't check it because I felt as though when she said, go and check the Bible, that was no, you know, I mean, I couldn't leave home to go and get it done myself. So I just didn't do it. So if I didn't have that foundation, when I went to university as an interested and curious student and heard the stories and, you know, things my friends were telling me, I could have possibly been swayed into a different, you know, background and understanding of Christ himself. Even something like yoga. I have my best friend, she does yoga every week. You know, she's always in this and she's like, you really need to try this. We need to go to this class and this and that. And I never was like, you know, I just go to the gym, you know. But to know that has a completely different meaning to just stretching and stuff like that. So I think living blindly could really potentially open you up to, you know, a life you maybe should not be living, because you have no idea what people are potentially manifested onto you, you know. So it all starts, like we always say, from young, and the examples and, you know, growing your kids and making sure that the kids that come to church are grounded, because I think manifesting things and speaking things onto people's life is so important. And for me personally, after seeing all the cultures and seeing things, that I'm like so curious. But, you know, sometimes I come and ask my mom something, she's like, Chelsea, you know, don't, you know. But, you know, to think where it could have been is crazy, you know. And nothing is wrong with other religions, but, you know, there's a Bible for a reason. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you. I like that you brought that point. And right before I open it up to Q&A, so if you have some questions, start to prepare them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself. But I really appreciate you. And I think now it's not just religions that, you know, are always existing. There's all these isms and schisms, as I like to call it, that people are developing. And even this word manifest. The Bible never says you yourself can manifest anything. The only person who has the power to manifest is God. But if you go on YouTube or you go on Instagram, you can see a whole bunch of people talking about, I manifested this car and this job in my life. All of these things are here. But if you don't know the Bible, like, you're going to be like, oh, manifest. Maybe if I have positive thinking, this thing will come to me, because that's what they're saying. And so it's really crucial that we understand what is truth, and not only what is false, but the middle, which is the scary half truths, which is where people get hung up on. And so, you know, as we open to questions, I wanted to just like implore everyone to, you know, hear our heart behind this conversation. Like, we are really, our discussion is really to really equip the youths. And we see like where we thought we could have been, like we could have had more of a firm footing. And we want to ensure like the next generation, the Gen Z, I don't know what the next generation after that would be, that they actually, you know, can put on that full armor of God and go out there, because it's really a battle out there. There's so much that we are, you know, coming in contact with and what we see on a daily basis. So really having that understanding and knowing what it is to have a personal relationship with Christ is so much more important now than ever before. But I will pause and I would just allow anyone, if they want to unmute themselves, or I'll be checking the chat as well. Oh, there's a question, great, from Carlene. So the question is, in your opinion, what is the role of your parents at everyone's current age, Carlene, or just my age in particular?
I think we should do everyone's, because your age is different from my drama, right?
Yeah.
So I think we should do everyone's different, correct?
Yeah, yes. Okay, great. Dominic, since you're muted, why don't you start?
All right. I'm not a parent. I have not read up on the roles, mostly roles of a parent. The most basic when I know of it is that the father is supposed to provide and the mother is there to nurture and care. But for me, as Jerome said, and Augusta, like Chelsea and Kayla, they have parents that were there that push them to go to church, that will tell them this and this is right, this is wrong. And I believe that's the general essence of what it should be in this aspect of it. Because for me, my mother, she told us that, well, she brought us to church with her. And then I would say around the age of 15 and 16. Some days I would just decide I don't want to church. I tired, I must stay home. But then she was telling me, she would go down the lines of don't say you want to stay home and this, no. But then when you need help, you pray to this Lord and talking about this and this. So it was a way of like, every parents should be there to be the check for the child. Because as I said earlier, we having a coach there, your parent could be your coach. If your parent is grounded in the faith and they are far enough where they believe that they can help you, that's what I believe the parent is there for. Because at the age where I'm at now, 18, Chelsea said that at 18 she left home. So it's a little harder for the parent to stay with the child. But I believe if the parent has been instilling the right things into the child from a young age, that when they leave, even if they don't have it all under control, they know that they can still come back to the parent and ask this and ask that. So that's what I believe the parent should be there for in this instance.
Thanks, Dominic. So I'm just rereading the question because I think there was an edit. So it's, what do you want from your parents? Not defined or documented roles. So pretty much in this time, in terms of like your growth and your faith, what do you need from your parents?
Well, at this stage right now, I think mother has done what it is she has to do right now. Is me saying that is basically at me now, even though yes, she's still there and she can still help out. But it's for me to want to dig deeper. It's for me to decide that I want to live this life, because she has already shown me, she has already introduced me to it. And I believe that's what it is that you do as a Christian. That's one of the major parts. Tell you go and spread the word. And it's for the people you're spreading the word to decide that they want to latch on to this and they want to grasp it and they want to know more for themselves. So, and the same thing that we said, you can't know Jesus from someone else. You can't say this is Jesus and this is what my parent knows as Jesus and this is what I'm telling you. I know how I'm going to find out for myself.
Well, I strongly believe currently that they should continue to be, a guide and an example on, how to live a godly life as well. Because no one is perfect, and we all have to understand that parents do make mistakes, but there are certain examples that we can take from them, that we can use to get us further ahead in life. So it's just continue to be a guide and an example to us as young people as we do this journey of Christianity and living a godly life.
Yeah, I will just click copy and paste on what Jerome said. I think, it's just for them to guide and help us, kind of, yes, we are, I think it's a mixture of both what Dominic and Jerome said. We have to want to do it and we have to, want to figure out thing, but I think there's no fault in having help and asking for help. So it's just to have the balance of the two. And then obviously you're going to get to a point where, you know, it's all up to you and not necessarily your parents.
I agree. I think at this, I'm 21, so at this point, my mom has done almost everything she was supposed to do. I think at this point, what I would say she still does. She would still look at me and tell me, Chelsea, is that what the Bible says, Chelsea? Or should you be doing that? So though she allows me to do and believe what I want, she's still there saying that this is not how you should do it. Go and read this, go and do that. Try to, you know, align yourself with the Bible, and then it's just for me as Chelsea have to figure, okay, what does she mean by that? So, you know, I feel as though your parents can only carry you so far, but it starts from the beginning. Because like Kayla said, when her mom told her that at that age, that stuck with her, you know. So when you turn 21, it doesn't really go away. You might question it more, and you might actually engage your parents. Say, okay, mommy, I mean, I just think it's pretty. I don't encourage slavery. I don't this and that. And I think the other thing my mom does or has been doing, especially when I left home, is showing me that she is not perfect, sharing her example. So when I do go through this, you know, and I tell her, mommy, you know, this really pained me, you know, Chelsea, that's what I went through, you know. But that came at a certain age. So being there and understanding that, yes, she's this, and I said godly woman because all she does is quote the Bible, but she's this godly person, but she went through so many things, and her just sharing that with me and being vulnerable with me, knowing that there's some things, you know, as a parent to child, you know, you might not want your kids to know what you went through, but just knowing that, okay, this is normal, and I could aspire to be just as good or better than my parent, you know, it's just something that genuinely helps me at this age.
Yeah. I would say at my age, 28, I think my parents have moved more into a supportive role. I remember joking with my mom a year or two ago, and I told her, I am still your daughter, but I'm no longer your child. And so in that realm, I have, as you said, trained up a child in the way they should go, and I haven't departed, but I have the legs and the wings now to kind of like chart my own course. But even with that, I would say that my parents are now in like that counsel range where if I have something going on and I have an issue, I call them, I've cried to them, I've been like, I want to give up. And they're like, all right, time to pray. You know, like that's the role that they're in now, where it's like they have, they believe that they've raised me to a certain extent, and I have put the boundaries in place. And that they are now in a supportive role where if I do need help, if I do need encouragement, that's their role, but not for general instructions and do this and do that. Yeah, no, too grown for that.
I think a good example for it too is like teaching a child to ride a bike, you know, you're shown what to do, you have the training wheels, and then you get to the point where, you know, it's time to take off the training wheels and kind of ride for yourself. You know, if you fall, you have your parents or aunties and uncles to help lift you back up or show you what you did wrong, but it's just a balance of that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So I see that we have another question in the chat. Let me just go to it. So it's from Donna. And it says, how do you guide your friends when you see them going down a wrong path, given what you've been taught? So this is more like, now that we have learned and now that we have this foundation, how do we use that to impact the people that we are around?
Okay, I guess I'm going to go in here because just on the same sermon that was given this past Sunday, it really stuck out to me more. And because like right now, I'm in some group chats with some of my friends, and there are some adults in these chats that post certain things, and we don't really talk on it much, but I would go and ask them, yo, did you read this? Did you understand what they said? And these are group chats within the church community, and that's one way that I could keep in touch with them and making them make sure that they're on the right path. But another thing about it too is, the sermon said, well, from the Bible, go on your own and talk to that friend. If that friend doesn't like, and when you talk to them, you give them information and reasons why what they're doing is wrong and how they could come up, and if you could help them, help them. If they don't teach one, then you go to another friend, and you try another friend that's going on the right path, and then approach him again. And once you approach him with another friend, because then he will see that it's not just you that are seeing this, but it's something that other people are seeing. Normally, when it's just one person, they might feel, man, you in a way, is he talking about? But when he could realize, or she could realize that more people in the community are realizing it, then they might be more inclined to deal with what is going on. And then even after that, then that's when you will go and bring in the heads. Because I wouldn't say, as your friend, you will talk to him frank. You wouldn't just go and try to get a head authority in it right away. So I believe you go yourself, you try to discuss with that friend, you try to give them knowledge, you try to help them out. Then you bring another friend to two of you all know. And then, as they will say, go to the head and have it more. And then even if still then, I really don't know, but that's for them to decide. But that's how I would go about trying to help all my friends.
I would say it depends.
Okay. And I think we have I like that question, but I think we have a couple of people with their hands up. So
Okay.
let's go to another question. Aisha, do you have a question?
Good night, everybody. Yes. Hi. Yes, my question is, and hi to my panelists. I'm so proud of you guys. I always cheer you on. The comment was posted that we need to, as a community, better equip our young people. So I just wanted to know what you would suggest is the best way that we go about doing that. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take this. I think it because it's so far-reaching. That's why we suggested the discipleship classes, and then in conjunction with that, just the church body itself being open and sharing with the youths, because we want to make sure that they are learning piece by piece and that they're growing with the faith, and so that it can't be just one-off. Because I remember going to camp and I really saw people open up in camp and ask questions and learn about the concepts of the Bible. However, camp was just 1 week, once or twice a year. And so that won't really, ensure that there's like sustainable growth. But what we're talking about is that we have these classes where maybe an hour and a half, nothing extensive, where they can come, there's a segment of learning whether it's what's the structure of prayer. Prayer starts off with praise and repentance, things like that. And then also there's this component where they can ask questions and really delve into what it is to actually be a Christian. And so we think that's a really good way to bridge the gap between having an elementary Sunday school understanding of the word and then having these a little bit more meat and potatoes that is necessary for the real world. I think we may have some things in.
Thank you.
Yes, you're most welcome. I think there was a question from Pastor Henry really early on. I think we kind of touched on it, but just to flag, I think Pastor Henry said, for the panelists who are at or have been to university, did the church prepare you for the corridors of higher learning? Just to slightly reiterate, I think I knew what was right and what was wrong. I just didn't know why. And I think that is what is necessary to kind of stand your ground when you have these conversations in university. And I think I could have learned more, definitely. But at the very least, I did know what was right and wrong going into university. Is there anything anyone wants to add? I think we're running close to time. So if anyone does have extra questions, when we close off the live, we can have the panelists stay on for a couple minutes. But otherwise, is there anything that the panel themselves want to say as like their closing statements? Just like 30 seconds. You're closed. All right. All right. Okay.
So I would like to thank everyone that came on, and gave all your questions as well. I really appreciate you all coming on, because as we said, this is a way for us to give our voice and for us to be heard. So if we were just talking amongst each other, nothing would really be done. Because first it will have to be us here talking and then trying to put it into, say, a paragraph or something, and then taking it to someone. When here we could have you all listening in and then taking what we have heard and then coming back to us. So I just want to thank you all for coming on and spreading the word. Thank you very much.
So I just want to say thank you for everyone. Before I give it back to Pastor Henry, I just hope you guys understood our heart behind what we were talking about. And it's really just us wanting to equip the youths and ensuring that they can fight out there, because there's a real fight. And I just want to, Auntie Pat, go ahead.
Renee, I just want to thank the panelists, you as the host and the panelists for this discussion. I serve as the Director of Children's Ministries, and I'm in charge of the pre-K through 6th grade students. And at one point in time, I even had the youth up to 18 years of age. And it was good to hear what you learned and what your experiences were as you were growing up in church. Because oftentimes as directors of these ministries, we don't get to hear that part of it. And also to hear from those of you who've gone on to the university level and to still show that the foundation that you received as you were growing up really has stood the test of time. But what I also appreciated hearing are the things that we need to do to improve the quality of our children's ministries. And it's good to hear that from those of you who've lived through it and who can now say, well, these are the things that will be helpful. I loved your suggestion of the discipleship classes. I think that is an amazing suggestion, something that I am going to definitely try to incorporate in my ministry. But thank you again so much for this wonderful, wonderful session. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Auntie Pat. We really appreciate that. I just want to check the chat before we close off. I think we're all good. Just many praises. Thank you so much. And you guys were a great audience.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Dad. Pastor Henry, I want to lead it back to you. This was a great session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so very much. All the thanks to you. And we really, really had a wonderful, wonderful session this evening. You guys were tremendous. I mean, beyond your youthful years, I listened to the maturity, the wisdom. It was amazing. Thank you so very much. Thank you very much. And Dr. Sutherland, if you're out there, your young people did a tremendous job. And so I just saw her come up. Yes,
they did.
She's there. All right. So thank you for joining Real Talk. Our next program is next Tuesday. Yes, our adults program is next Tuesday, and we are going to have a Q&A session so that all the subjects that we discuss during this quarter, you can come and just bring your questions, send your questions, because we want to make sure we have the panelists here to answer those questions for you. So we had subjects like forgiveness, the one on estate planning, several of them. Even the one last week, you can have questions on that one also. So plan to be with us next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on Real Talk. And the Lord bless you richly, and panelists, thank you so very, very much. And good night, everyone.
Good night to each and every one of you all.
Yes, and I'm seeing some claps going there. So send the panelists some claps for me, please. Some big rounds of applause. can open your mics and unmute and clap them for me, please.
Thank you so much. Excellent.
Very good, very good, very good.
Great job.
Pastor Henry, so you know you're still on live, right?
Thank you.
Yes, we're still online, yes. You see how good you guys were? Nobody wants to leave.
Pastor Henry, we're still on YouTube.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me just turn off this, yes.